Well, it is very good to see everybody here this morning, almost afternoon. I appreciate the visitors that we have with us today. And if you've not already done so, then we encourage you to fill out a visitor's card and place it in the basket as it goes by at the end of our service today. All we want is to contact you and let you know how appreciative we are of your presence with us today and to extend an invitation to you to study with us. If you're not familiar with the gospel, then we would love to sit down and have a Bible study with you and show you the good news that salvation is freely offered to you right now. I often hear people complaining about how they don't have enough time in life, how they're always so busy, and so they're trying to maximize the time that they have working while they're commuting and always being connected to their cell phone, complaining when a business, a restaurant, or something like that doesn't have an internet connection available to them. And perhaps I'm not the greatest expert in feeling spread too thin because I consciously keep my activities to a reasonable level. People ask me, well, why don't you play music anymore, Ryan? Or why don't you do this hobby or that hobby? Or why don't you watch this favorite TV show of mine? And I'm sure it's a good TV show. I'm glad you have your favorite TV show. But I can't add more TV shows to my life, and I can't add more hobbies to my life. I simply don't have the time. You know, the thing about time, though, is that there's always the same exact amount of time every single day, year in and year out, since time started. So it seems like the problem is not that there is too little time, but too many activities that we're trying to fit into the same amount of time. One writer put it really well, and mind you, this was from an article back in 2002, and a lot has changed since then. Things have gotten even more busy, but I like the sentiment that Andre Sue offers here in this World Magazine article where she says, I don't know how we arrived at this place, observed one writer that she's quoting. It's all part of the unintended consequences of scientific advances in convenience, I guess, like the way email just gives you one more thing to check every day. Now, in the same article, she goes on to describe a correspondence that she had with a Christian missionary in Turkey who thanked her for not stating how busy she always was in her correspondence. It is apparently a terrible habit that we Americans have. This isn't the only writer who noted this, by the way. In other articles that I've read, the same sentiment was expressed. That wherever Americans go and whenever Americans talk, when people say, well, how are you doing these days? We always respond with, oh, you know, just as busy as ever. And the rest of the world hates hearing that from us. It's become such a convenient social meme for us, such a stock answer for all of our shortcomings, that one would think, based on texts and tweets alone, that our culture is imploding from being so busy all the time. Now, one of the reasons that I have tried, at least in my life, to avoid complicating things with too many commitments and hobbies and TV shows and pursuits is that I don't want to look back in my old age and regret that I missed out on the things that were actually important. The things that I'll actually care about 50 years from now. If you feel like you have also become too busy, then take a few moments to ponder the things in your own life that you might actually care about in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, or on your deathbed. Are you really going to care about all the hours that you worked when you did not spend those hours with your kids or your wife or your husband who love you so very much? Are you really going to care about all of the nice vacations that you took when, in order to afford all of those vacations, you had to work overtime every day, every week, during your child's most important and developmental years? Are you really going to care that you got ahead in the business world or got this or that accolade when at the end of your life you did not work as a Christian the way that you ought to? You strived to become the manager, to become the executive, to become the vice president, but you did not strive in your life to become an elder in a local congregation. My friends, we fill our lives with all of the least important things possible. And then we end our lives with nothing but regret. Turn to Psalm 71. And I want to notice a few phrases here out of Psalm 71, which was presumably written by an elderly man in repose. Psalm 71. Notice beginning in verse 1, In thee, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be ashamed. In thy righteousness deliver me, and incline thine ear to me, and save me. Be thou to me a rock of habitation to which I may continually come. Thou hast given commandment to save me, for thou art my rock and my fortress. Verse 4, Rescue me, O my God, out of the hand of the wicked, out of the grasp of the wrongdoer and the ruthless man, for thou, O Lord, art my hope. O Lord my God, thou art my confidence from my youth. We'll stop there for just a second. You notice that when the psalmist was a youth, he did not put his confidence in the fact that he was a youth. He said, From my youth, my confidence has been you. Even in his most fruitful years, his first love and his first hope and his first source of strength was God. Yet in the hustle and bustle of our youth, many of us focus on college and a new career and a new marriage and young children to the neglect of God, which is, I think, one of the reasons why the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 32 through 35, that the single person actually has a unique opportunity, an opportunity that he or she is never going to have for the rest of his or her life when that person gets married. That when you're single, you can give singular focus to God. Now, I don't regret in any way getting married and having children. There's not even a tinge of regret at all. But I do look sometimes at my own work as a preacher, and I do think that my kids, my family, my spouse, those sorts of things, as important as they are, the most important thing on planet Earth to me, it does make it harder to get work done for God. So we need to be really, really careful that when we're young, that we don't get so caught up in always moving on to the next thing. I'm so focused on college because I want to finish college, so that I can become so finished on a career that I can move up in my career, so that I can be so focused on my career that I can be somebody would want to marry and take care of my family and buy a nice house, and then I have to work so that I can pay for that nice house and all the vacations that I have to do to get away from my job that I have to do to afford all of my nice vacations. And yet this writer says, from my youth, even when I was young enough and strong enough to have strength and confidence in my youth, you, God, you were the thing that I cared about. Move on to verse 8. My mouth is filled with thy praise and with thy glory all day long, verses 14 through 16. But as for me, I will hope continually, and will praise thee yet more and more. My mouth shall tell of thy righteousness and of thy salvation all day long, for I do not know the sum of them. I will come with the mighty deeds of the Lord God. I will make mention of thy righteousness, thine alone. His reflection in life centers on what God has done for him in life, not on his own earthly accomplishments or whatever thing that he might have done in his life. No matter how good those things might be, when he looks back on his life, he says, God, you did great things for me. You made me something useful in your service, in your kingdom. God, you have been my strength. You have been my glory. You are an awesome God. Start focusing on God a little bit more and focusing less on your activities and your hobbies and how busy you are, and you just might have the time to grow as a Christian. Notice verse 9. Do not cast me off in the time of old age. Do not forsake me when my strength fails. Verse 18. Even when I am old and gray, O God, do not forsake me until I declare thy strength to this generation, thy power to all who are to come. While getting caught up in the past is a temptation for many, I like the way that this writer makes it clear that our waning years are an opportunity to think more intensely about God and to show his glory to others. You know, the subtitle of Psalm 71 says, Prayer of an Old Man for Deliverance. So the man was old. He's thinking back on his life. Now, he might have been facing some difficult trials, but as for us, in our old age in the United States of America, we always see it as the golden years. Like, I worked all those years. I had that career. I did all that time made all that money so that I could finally retire and live the good life in Sun City or Mesa or whatever. And I did all that so that I could retire and finally have time for myself. And I wonder, in all of that, where was God? In all of that career, where was the time for God? In the retirement, where was the time made for God? I'm retired, I made all that money so that I can retire and play golf, and I'll learn how to cook. That's what I'll do in my old age. I'll buy a hibachi grill. And in all that we forget, from the time I'm born to the time that I die, my life is God's. It's God's, to be spent in His service, to be expended for Him. Sadly, we lack that perspective in the midst of our youth and vigor. And I wonder if I will really care about most of my youthful activities when I look back on my life as an old man. Be careful of wasting your time on unimportant things, lest you look back with regret on a marriage that was not what it could have been, strained relationships with your kids, fellow Christians who eventually learned that you were unreliable and uncommitted, and a Bible that collected dust on the bookshelf. Solomon was also a man with a lot of accomplishments, and yet Solomon looked back as he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 12, he said, "Beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body." The conclusion, when all has been said, is fear God and keep His commandments. Because this applies to every person. He said, I can look back on a life of accomplishment and achievement, and I learned a lot, and I know a lot, and I wrote a lot, and I devoted my life to the intellect. And yet it was wearying. And at the end of it all, I realized what I should have been doing that whole time was devoting myself to God, fearing Him, and keeping His commandments. No matter how many books you write or how many speeches you conduct or how many dollars you earn, the real question boils down to your relationship with God. Our worldly pursuits just leave us feeling exhausted, too exhausted to give anything back to God. Which reminds me of Luke chapter 10. In Luke chapter 10, beginning in verse 38, we meet a woman. A great woman, good woman, who was doing good things with her life, but forgot that in all the midst of the hustle and bustle that she had to slow down and listen to Jesus. Let's read here in Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Now, as they were traveling along, Jesus entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha welcomed Him into her home. And she had a sister named Mary, who, moreover, was listening to the Lord's words, seated at His feet. But Martha was distracted with all of her preparation. And she came up, and I can appreciate that, by the way. I can appreciate all the times that I've hosted a men's class at my house. I can appreciate on a Sunday morning getting ready to preach. And I'm worried about the tie and my hair, and do I have all my notes, and does this have batteries, and does this thing over here, and oh no, I left my Bible in the car, and I'm sitting there thinking about the sermon that I'm going to preach instead of the Lord's Supper that I'm supposed to be partaking of. I can appreciate that. I can appreciate a person who likes everything to be neat and tidy and in order, and cares when people show up to my house. I can appreciate that. But Martha was distracted with all these preparations, and she came up to Jesus and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Well, somebody's got to do it, right? Somebody had to clean this and vacuum that and prepare this and that. Somebody has to make you feel comfortable while you're here. Somebody has to do it. Don't we rationalize it also? Somebody has to earn the money. Somebody has to go out and do that. Hey, somebody has to volunteer for this thing or that. Somebody's got to do the PTA meetings. Somebody has to do it. Tell her to help me. Tell her to do what's right. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you're worried and you're bothered about so many things. But only a few things are necessary. Really, only one. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. One of the pitfalls of being too busy is that we tend to look down on those who we view as wasting their time in idle pursuits. I'll give you a few examples. Having longer conversations rather than utilitarian small talk. Who's got time for all that talking? Who's got time to sit and have a heart-to-heart with somebody else? Going out to dinner with people that we care about and staying well after the check has already come. That we're so busy to move on to the next activity, to the next thing. I don't have time to sit and linger at the table at the restaurant. Turning off a cell phone so that time with family is not interrupted. Are you incensed when somebody else makes himself unavailable at your inconvenience? How about politely declining some activities to have a quiet night at home? That's a tough one. When you find out that somebody has a ticket to the big game and they want you to go. When you find out that there's some activity that you could do, a concert that's in town. Oh, more work that I forgot to do at the office. All these activities that we want to... How often have you just politely said, no, I'm going to spend the evening with my family tonight? Too much activity kills relationships. It kills friendships. For somebody like Martha in Luke chapter 10, it was difficult to see how Jesus could approve of her sister's behavior. Mary was just sitting there, doing nothing. There's always time for learning later. You can always read and study and learn and talk later. Right now we've got preparations to make. Pigs in a blanket don't make themselves, after all. All she saw was Mary not helping. What she couldn't see was that Mary was learning and growing and building a relationship with her Savior. Similarly, we complain when our relationships are strained because we can't comprehend the benefits of a slower, quieter, more meaningful life with the people that we actually care about. We divide everything into half-hour blocks, conveniently enough, because most TV shows are about a half hour long. So that's the way we think. I'm going to do this for a half an hour and that for a half an hour, and I'm going to take a half hour to... Everything's all divided up. But what if your child needs more than a half an hour? Well, I'll have to fit you in sometime next Tuesday, perhaps. What if your spouse needs more time? We pack everything so tightly every single day that we don't have the flexibility. We don't have the room in our schedules that when a Christian calls and says, I need help with something, I'm having a Bible study with somebody, we don't have the time to help anybody. We don't have the time to take that time to help somebody anymore. So why do we hate downtime so much? Why are we so opposed to downtime, and yet we love to complain about it? We say, oh, I'm always so busy all the time. You know how it is. Busy with this and busy with that. And I want to call people out and say, don't complain about being busy with all of the activities that you chose to bring into your life. Nobody twisted your arm. Nobody held a gun to your head. But we love to be busy and yet reserve the right to complain about it. Why do we love to be so busy all the time? And why do we love to be connected all the time as well? An element of this is that we're always on the go, mobile. We're always trying to do work. We're always trying to be connected, always on our cell phones. It's interesting, in 2014, in August of 2014, there was a study that was done. And I've got the summation of it here in Scientific American magazine. In the experiment, participants were asked to sit alone in a room for up to 15 minutes with no cell phone, no reading material, no music, so nothing to entertain them save their own rambling thoughts. Afterward, most subjects reported that they found it difficult to concentrate and that they did not enjoy the experience. Then, you're going to laugh at this one, or be horrified, To assess just how much subjects disliked doing nothing, the researchers repeated the experiment. Only this time, they gave volunteers the added option of occasionally giving themselves a mild electric shock. Two-thirds of the men in the study and 1/4 of the women, so you're not that much smarter than we are, chose to take advantage of the shock option at least once during their time out. And on average, it took less than 6 minutes to resort to shocking oneself. Think about that. Take your cell phone away. No cell phone, no music, no internet, no stimulation of any kind. You just have to sit there for 15 minutes. And it takes less than 6 minutes for most people to get so bored that they go, well, I guess I could try shocking myself. I could give it a try. Why do we hate that stuff so much? When we have such a great precedent in Jesus, we've been studying the Gospels lately in our Bible classes in Matthew 14, verse 13. Now, when Jesus heard it, he withdrew from there in a boat to a lonely place by himself. Mark 1:35. And in the early morning, while it was still dark, he arose and went out and departed to a lonely place and was praying there. Mark 6:46. And after bidding them farewell, he departed to the mountain to pray. Luke 5 and verse 16, and he himself would often slip away, often, by the way, not occasionally, but he would often slip away to the wilderness to pray. Luke 6 and verse 12, and it was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. And yet we can't sit there for 15 minutes without a cell phone before we want to shock ourselves out of boredom. Of course, it wasn't just the loneliness that Jesus was seeking. It was the opportunity to meditate, to pray. And I think one of my favorite words in this kind of context, to decompress. But very few people in our culture are comfortable being alone, especially alone with their thoughts, let alone being alone and praying, confronting those thoughts in the presence of God. We make rude assumptions about people who walk into restaurants and eat by themselves, or attend a wedding alone, or who don't want to attend every single social function. Well, they're kind of uninterested or unsociable. They don't want to come to everything all the time. Like starving wolves, we ravenously fill every single second of our days with activities, all while indulging quite annoyingly in the self-pity of being too busy all the time. So with the time that we have left in our lesson, I want to answer the question of why do we complain so much about self-imposed busyness? And what is so bad about being alone or not having an activity planned for every single moment? Consider a few practical applications as we bring our lesson to its close. The benefits of being offline. And you know I have a cell phone. It's an iPhone 4S. It's my first smartphone I ever got. So you know I'm not opposed to technology. It's not like technology is a bad thing. But you know what a bad thing is? Is addiction to anything. Whether you're addicted to alcohol, addicted to pornography, or addicted to the constant need of media attention. Addiction is bad. So time alone, when you force yourself to be alone, time alone forces us to confront what we really think about things. I think one of the reasons why those people were so interested in shocking themselves after a few minutes being alone with no cell phone is that you don't always like what you find in your brain. Alone time makes you go, I don't always have the right attitudes. I can be petty and small. I haven't thought through this very well, have I? And when we're alone with our thoughts, we don't really like a lot of our thoughts that go through our mind. So maybe if we allowed ourselves to be alone more often, we could work through some of those things instead of ignoring them. I don't like what's going through that dark corner of my brain, so I'm going to drown it out right now with some television or music. No. Don't drown it out. Go through the process. Confront that ugly thought. Confront the lust that you're seeing in your thinking and in your attitudes. Confront the greed. Confront your covetousness. Confront your ego. Confront those things. Let them come out into the light. Nothing kills mold faster than light and fresh air. Stop hiding things away with all of this busyness of ours. When mine is the only voice that I hear, I'm able to explore my thinking on relationships and spirituality more clearly. It helps reverse the effects of television and media. You've got a lot of media coming at you from every direction, so time alone helps bring you back from the brink of overexposure and inundation. Time alone helps bring you back from that. I can learn to focus on one thought for more than a few moments. Notice the role of meditation in Psalm 119. We've already read a couple verses out of Psalm 119 earlier in our worship service, but please notice verse 97. Verse 97 says, "Oh, how I love thy law. It is my meditation all the day." You ever meditated on the Bible all the day? Had a Bible verse that you thought about all day long? Or do you give Bible verses 5 minutes, 2 minutes, usually? Verse 99, "I have more insight than all my teachers, for thy testimonies are my meditation." Verse 148, "My eyes anticipate the night watches that I may meditate on thy word." Meditation is a spiritual discipline that we don't often think about today. We know about singing, and we know about studying, and we know about prayer, but when was the last time you meditated on the Word of God? To take just a single verse, a single idea, and rolled it around in your mind in silence. Not just for a few moments, but for half an hour, an hour. When was the last time you meditated on God and His Word? Intentionally leave gaps in your schedule for reflection and prayer. I've always liked the example of Isaac in Genesis chapter 24 and verse 63, that he was out by himself in the fields praying, meditating. I think the assumption is that that was a regular activity for somebody like Isaac. And another benefit to leaving time empty in our schedule is that it gives us the flexibility to help others. You don't always know when somebody from this congregation is going to need your help. You don't always know when somebody needs a piece of furniture moved, when one of our widows needs a ride to the hospital for something. You don't always know when somebody needs a ride to a doctor's appointment. You're not always going to have it written into your schedule to practice charity, to change a tire, to sit on the phone with somebody who's crying, to give comfort to somebody whose parent just passed away, or to give a lingering hug to someone who just found out they have cancer. You can't write that stuff into your schedule. So when you intentionally leave gaps in your schedule, it gives you the flexibility to be a Christian who is on call all the time. We don't always have that. We don't always have that luxury. In Luke chapter 10, we read about the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan could have easily said, just like the Levite and the priest, "I'm too busy right now. I've got stuff I'm doing right now. I'm on my way to this or that important business." But the Good Samaritan saw a man on the side of the road near death who needed help. And he put his life on hold because helping that injured man was more important to him. How important is that sort of thing to you? Oh, the busyness of our business, my friends. We love to be busy and we love to complain about it. But when was the last time you ever complained about being so busy doing God's work? So busy helping people, so busy loving people, so busy on the phone with people who are hurting, so busy hugging people who are sorrowful. When was the last time you complained about being so busy loving your wife? So busy spending quality time with your kids? So busy, I've got all this Bible reading I've been doing all day long. Oh, we spent all day long worshiping God. The busyness of our business keeps us from the business of doing God's work. Now, if you're not a Christian here this morning, you really ought to be. You need to put God first. You need to bring Him into your life, and the only way that that can happen is through Christ. In Christ we are born again. In baptism. In baptism. Mark 16, verse 16 says, "He who believes and is baptized shall be saved, but he who does not believe shall be condemned." So if this invitation applies to you in any way, then please come forward as we stand and sing.